Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Battle Breakdown video. Now, if you enjoy today's content, you should also check out the video I uploaded today on my second channel, X2, which I'm really trying to get to 100,000 as soon as possible, hopefully by the end of the year. Basically, in that video, I cover the New Republic and Rebellion's fleet building and management strategies and show how they can be used in games like Star Wars Empire at War. So basically everything from battle lines to the use of frigates to engagement zones to fleet composition, all covered in that video, which you'll probably enjoy even if you're not a Star Wars Empire at War player. Link to that down in the description and the upper right hand corner. So, after the defeat of Grand Admiral Thrawn, the New Republic was really in shambles, and to be honest, so was the rest of the galaxy. One of the final Grand Admirals had re-emerged to unite the fractured Imperial elements before being killed by his own bodyguard at the Battle of Bilbringi, returning the Empire, of course, to chaos. The New Republic 2 was seriously weakened, but wanted to appear strong, so they decided to immediately launch another campaign against a major Imperial Warlord. Their choice was Prince Admiral Delak Krennel of the Ciutric Hegemony. Today we'll be covering the final battle of that campaign, the Battle of Ciutric, which saw Admiral Ackbar lead a task force against the Prince Admiral's defensive fleet. So I'm not going to cover all of the details leading up to this battle. We actually covered the book that this campaign appears in, Isard's Revenge, in the most recent episode of TapCaf Transmissions, which is my podcast, so you can check that out if you're interested. But essentially, the Ciutric Hegemony was seen as weak enough to fall to the New Republic, and was actually a ripe target because Delak Krennel had participated in the murder of Sate Pestage and had stolen his territory. Krennel meanwhile positioned the hegemony as a sort of bastion for humanocentrism, and was actually working closely with the clone of former head of Imperial Intelligence Izani Isard. The real Isard actually was still alive despite being dead, and came together to work with Rogue Squadron to plan a massive assault against the planet, which would kill Krennel and basically take away the region's capital of Ciutric. Making this all more complicated was the allegation of a hidden, but in reality non-existent superweapon known as Pulsar Station. Anyway, the plan was that the New Republic would get to the planet's surface undetected and undercover. A New Republic fleet would come in and clear out any space forces. Then Imperial commandos supplied by Izani Isard would help take the planet's surface. Now, that last part wouldn't end up happening. Isard would betray the New Republic, but that doesn't really matter because we'll be focusing on the space battle anyway. So, Wedge sent a message to the New Republic telling them to form a fleet and to arrive at Ciutric at a specific point. The New Republic obliged and sent a task force made up of Home 1, of course led by Admiral Ackbar, an Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer, the Emancipator, 3 Nebulon B frigates, and then 6 Corellian corvettes, so a pretty decently sized task force and exactly what Wedge had asked for. Unfortunately, Krennel was aware of the attack and had massed more defensive forces than expected, including 2 ISD-2s, the Reckoning in the Decisive, an Interdictor Star Destroyer, the Binder, and a Victory Star Destroyer, Emperor's Wisdom. 2 Imps, a Victory, and Interdictor Star Destroyer meant that the Empire pretty seriously outgunned the New Republic in this case. The Victory Star Destroyer is really what weighed the scales here in the Empire's favor. The ships were not very sophisticated, but especially for their size, they could put out a lot of firepower in the form of both turbo lasers and missiles. Ackbar, knowing that his fleet was outgunned, began a retreat process. The fleet turned away from Ciutric and the defensive forces and headed towards the outside of the gravity well so they could jump to hyperspace. As Ackbar's cruisers began moving, he ordered the smaller ships, including the Nebulon Bs, fighters, CR-90s, and a few smaller freighters, to engage the Victory Star Destroyer, basically so that it couldn't shoot missiles unmolested at the rear of the capital ships. As the fleet retreated, the 2 Imperial Star Destroyers followed them in sort of a staggered line, with one of them behind the Rebel fleet and the other just off to the side. Krennel ordered both ships to fire on Home 1, however, the Rebel Star Destroyer Emancipator was actually blocking one of the Imperial ships. The the Decisive, which was ordered to move laterally into a better position. Still, Home 1 was taking major damage at this point, even just from the rear Star Destroyer, and its rear shields were pierced, with major damage being taken to the hull. However, as the Decisive moved, both Rebel capital ships fired directly on the Reckoning and managed to pierce a portion of that Star Destroyer's shields, doing some damage to its hull as well. However, with the New Republic now close to an escape position, the Empire raised an interdiction field, which is exactly what Admiral Ackbar had been waiting for. As the Reckoning altered position so that its still shielded side would be presented towards the fleet, Ackbar engaged what has been known to the galaxy as a Thrawn Pincer. So let's explain this. The basic principle of hyperspace jumps, especially jumps mid-battle, is that there's a high degree of inaccuracy. You don't know how close to your target you'll get, especially in the heat of battle. You could easily miss by thousands of kilometers and just put your ship completely out of position, especially if you're jumping towards a moving target or you're jumping towards forces which are already there. In response, Grand Admiral Thrawn, who played highly on the mechanics of hyperspace during battle, developed the idea of the Thrawn Pincer. Basically, he would use an artificially generated gravity well made by an interdictor cruiser or Star Destroyer as a way to pull a ship out of hyperspace. If you imagine an interdiction field projected as a cone, basically he would jump his fleet into the cone, or his ship, and he would basically be able to control which position it exited hyperspace from. Thrawn used this technique at many battles, including his siege on Coruscant, and basically the strength of the Thrawn Pincer is that you can put a ship in an extremely unexpected location, catching the enemy totally off guard. Ackbar's use of the Thrawn Pincer was unique because he used an enemy interdictor as sort of a hyperspace beacon, and this requires a bit of finagling because typically interdiction cones are deployed away from the cruiser, so if you were to just jump a ship from the same position that the fleet had just come from, it would be pulled out far, far away from the battlefield. So what Ackbar did was essentially have his fleet jump deeper into the solar system, then turn around. When the interdiction field was generated, 2 Victory Star Destroyers, one of Thrawn's favorite ships for this maneuver by the way, jumped in towards Ciutric and were dragged out of space by the Binder's interdiction field, the Binder being the name of the Star Destroyer. The 2 Victories immediately launched their entire missile reserves at the Reckoning, which had just adjusted so that its unshielded portion was facing the rear. They devastated the ship, and a stray missile would come to destroy the bridge and kill Delak Krennel. The Decisive and the Binder, which were the ISD and the Interdictor Star Destroyer, were then captured by the New Republic, and the Emperor's Wisdom, which was the Victory Star Destroyer, may too have been captured, though it's not said explicitly in the book. So that's Ackbar's use of the Thrawn Pincer, again made unique by the fact that the New Republic didn't actually have an interdictor at this battle, but still with some really classic Thrawn touches, including feinting to get the enemy out of position, then making them pay with Victory Star Destroyers. And again, now we get 2 more ships for the New Republic fleet, so all around a very successful battle, which of course was also successful on the ground despite the double crossing by Izani Isard. Today's question comes from Toby Wilson Network, who says the Essential Guide to Warfare makes it sound like the GA slide into full-born authoritarianism happened nearly overnight. Is much known about the people who orchestrated this transition outside of Jason. So yeah, the first few books in Legacy of the Force do cover this. I don't remember all the details because it's been a bit since I've read them, but basically it all starts relatively innocently. There's a discussion in the first book at like the dinner table of the Skywalkers where different people in the family have different views on the matter. A lot of it has to do with taxation of individual systems, not only in the form of money, but also in required additions to the GA's defensive fleet. Then we also see the formation of the Galactic Alliance Guard and just other stuff like that. So the transition is a bit slower than the Essential Guide to Warfare discusses it, but that's mostly for brevity, of course. It hasn't gone fully authoritarian by the start of Legacy of the Force, so if you want to see how the Galactic Alliance changes, I recommend that you read that series because it's really good. Anyway, that's all I have for now, guys. Until next time, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.